actually be tying up a couple, although I'll keep them as separate videos, a couple patterns that are that are called the Electric Caddis. And the one I'm going to start out with is going to be this one here. And 30 years ago or so, when I started fly fishing and started tying flies, the books that I kind of turned to learn step by step was books by Jack Dennis and Mike Lawson, watching Mike Lawson as well. And this particular Electric Caddis is an old one that Mike Lawson had tied, and you'll see if you look at the two videos that they are tied very differently from one another. So I'm going to try to get as close as I possibly can to the Electric Caddis that Mike Lawson ties, or ties. This is a so I've got a scud hook in the vise, and I've got a nickel colored bead on there, and I'm just going to use some olive sheer 14-aught thread. We'll just get that started here on the hook. Take a few wraps back to kind of secure that tag end down a little bit. I'll just let that hang, and I'll swing in here with my scissors here really quickly, and we'll just go ahead and make a snip. Get ourselves attached to the hook here. I was actually watching this yesterday. There's kind of an old dated video, and I hadn't seen this particular pattern before. I tied the Electric Caddis the other way, which I'll be doing another video on, but this was Mike Lawson fishing, getting a beautiful fish. Then he and Jack Dennis just kind of sitting together while Mike Lawson was tying this up. So I watched the video, of course, and I was like, yeah, I want to do a little bit of a throwback. I mean, that's my neck of the woods, growing up there in Idaho. So we're going to start off with just a piece of mirage tinsel here. And this is just I think it's in a large size. And I'm just going to secure that right here behind the hook here, or the bead. I'm not overly worried about bulk on this particular fly, but I'm trying to do it the way that Mike Lawson did it in his videos. So what we're going to do is we're going to tie this tinsel on, kind of trying to keep it centered as we move down around the back of the hook here. So hopefully you can see we're trying to focus here on keeping that nice and centered there. And we're going to take that mirage tinsel here, pearlescence is I think what Mike was calling it when he was tying it. You take that almost halfway around the bend of the hook here. I tied one of these up earlier, and I actually really like the pattern quite a lot. So I've got that there. You can see my tinsel is my pearl tinsel's in place there. I'm going to go ahead and reach for my next piece of material, which is just going to be a little piece of chartreuse wire. So I've got that chartreuse wire. That's in a brassie size here, and we're just going to tie this in also back just right here behind the bead. We'll want this to be tapered, but not like overly focused on taking a ton of thread wraps. Taper. We want to keep the body pretty slim, and we're going to be using two different types of dubbing on this pattern. So we're going to go ahead and make sure that is where my thread is going to start. I'm going to just go ahead and bring that up a little bit, and we'll go ahead and throw a little bit of wax on our thread here. Probably looks like a ton with a micro lens, but that's okay. Move the materials out of the way here, and this is kind of how we're sitting right at the moment. Dubbing blend, and I just chose this because it kind of looked like what Mike was tying with in terms of the body here, and the body was almost this really light kind of green, mossy green kind of color with a little bit of shiny antron in it, which is kind of what this is looking like. It was the closest thing I had anyway, to try to match as closely as I could. So I'm going to dub that on. I don't need to dub it on incredibly tight. And I'm okay leaving a little distance here because I need to travel back down to the bend of the hook here. So I've got some bare thread wraps there to work out just perfectly fine. We're just going to work our way up, again trying to keep the dubbing here as tight as we possibly can so that we keep a pretty tight body on this fella. Moving up. And we got it about right there. Boy, I'm telling you, 1 millimeter away from getting it just right on. So here we go. We're going to go ahead and take a few more thread wraps up here towards the top. And I'm good with that. We'll be covering some of that up anyway. So with that kind of in place, our next step is I'm going to go ahead and take this pearl tinsel and I'm going to stretch it over the back of the fly here. And we're going to try to center it as well as we can. Sometimes I just throw a loop over it just like that, and then I'll cinch it. I'll position it with my fingers and make sure that I've got that kind of right over the center, and then I'll kind of cinch it down a little tighter and take a couple of thread wraps just like so. And now I might take a couple of thread wraps back over the top of it, and I can clip this material out. That's all we'll be using of that. I'll set it aside, and I'll be able to tie another one with that. From here, we're going to wrap our chartreuse brassie size up. And again, I'm going to want to be somewhat careful here because these wraps of wire can very easily just pull that tinsel over one side of the hook, and that's not what I'm looking to do. So I'm trying to keep an eye on my tinsel, keeping it in place, while at the same time trying to get some good thread wrap or wire wraps coming up here. Sometimes what works really well when you're doing this is to take the wrap, put it right where you want it, like that, and then pull down, straight down. Now we're getting up near the business end here. I'm not as concerned here. I'm just going to be tying that off. Throw a couple of thread wraps over it on this side, on the other side. I'll just kind of helicopter until that kind of breaks itself off here. Okay, so we're left with that, which is a really nice, thin-bodied fly. And you can see the chartreuse wire and the tinsel, which is probably why he ended up calling it the electric. So next we're going to reach for our partridge. This time I'm going to just use the skin. So I've got the entire partridge skin here. We're going to pick out one feather to use kind of for legs on this thing. I'm going to try to find a feather that's got some good speckling on it and is in good shape. And there are like 1 million feathers here in one of these skins, and so that's really handy to have the whole skin. So when I pull it off, it's gonna look something like that. Maybe a little bit more bent than I like, but that's okay. We'll deal with it. And from there, I'm gonna go ahead and strip off these curly pieces of that fiber or of the feather here. This is kind of what I'm looking for anyway. I've got a nice feather. Nothing is, none of these fibers up here are broken off. I've stripped the fuzzies off, so I have a nice shaft to work on here. And what I'm going to do here, because I'm going to use this for legs, is I'm going to want to clip out just the tiniest little bit of the very center of this out. Where that came from. And I'll create this kind of valley here. I'm going to just sneak back in with my scissors here and push down a little bit, and that will allow me to get a couple more, get that a little bit deeper without taking any of those fibers off either side. So now I'm left with a really prepared feather with the handle and with the two pieces sticking out. I'm going to circle back and throw a little bit more wax on my thread here for this operation, because it'll just help us hold this down a little bit better, or secure it down without it slipping around. So we'll move our partridge feather into place, and I'm going to have this kind of straddling on either side of the hook, and then I'm going to pinch it pretty tight against the hook. I'm going to take a single loose wrap, and when I pull it tight, I'm going to pull up Now I'll keep that from spinning around. I don't want to tie it overly tight because I do want to look at length here. So you can see what we've got at this point. We've got some good looking legs going on here. A little bit longer than I want it. And so that's why I keep the handle on here. I can actually very gently pull this. Just like so. Just the smallest amount really was all we did there. And I did that just so I could shorten those fibers up just a tiny little bit. So now that I've got that in place, I'm going to come back in here with my scissors, and we're going to go ahead and trim out the back end here of this partridge feather. Just like so. Okay, I'm going to take a look from the top, make sure things are kind of where I want them to be. Go ahead and secure those back down against the sides of the hook, and I'm going to go ahead and wrap and clean up those butt ends just a hair. And we'll come back to where we're going to tie in our next material, and actually our final material here. But you can see we've got some nice buggy looking legs. I love the partridge and the way that it helps us with building those legs in. Okay, so now we can take a look and see those legs sticking out in the nice thin body. And we're going to go to our final material here, which is going to be some semi-seal. And we're going to use kind of the darkest olive that's available. So the body of, or the thorax of the abdomen, I guess, of this fly is going to be that lighter color. And then we're going to use this semi-seal that's a little bit darker up near the bead. So we're looking at material that looks about like that. I'm going to go ahead and give myself some thread and go ahead and finger dub that on. Kind of tight, but not too tight, because I do want it to be a little bit buggy. So we're going to go ahead and take a few wraps back here over those partridge feather wings that we created. And then we're just going to kind of finish it off, moving up towards the bead here. I'm going to put just the tiniest little bit more on here. Okay, so we've got our, pretty much we're at an end here. We'll go ahead and do a nice whip finish on this. Maybe kind of circle back in and do a little bit of cleanup, but not a lot. I'll grab my whip finisher here real quick. And we'll just throw a few turns right behind the bead there. Nice and secure, pull that nice and tight. Then I can come back in here now with my scissors. That's not really where you want to drop your scissors. Okay, focus. Okay, so there you have it. This is the Electric Caddis. Tied the way that I was, as close as I can to the way that I saw Mike Lawson tying it. Good looking pattern. So give it a shot.